Well, hello, good morning, welcome. I'm glad that I can see y'all. I'm glad that this room is cooling down slowly but surely. Glad that we've got power back, but at Aaron's right, we were prepared to worship our great God, whether there was power or not. But here we are. We are here. Y'all apparently liked last week's message, at least enough to come back this week. So thank y'all for being here. Thank you for joining us for worship and for week 2 of our sermon series, God-Sized Goals. We were talking all about how we set and achieve goals, any goals really, but particularly we want to focus on discerning and being obedient to the goals that the Lord is putting on our hearts. Next Tuesday is going to be an awesome day for me personally. I get to celebrate 2 years of marriage to my beautiful and amazing wife, Casey. Oh, thank you. Yeah, 2 years. She put up with me for 2 years, y'all. Like, she is a saint, and y'all need to tell her such. But I remember whenever I decided that I was going to marry Casey, I had a goal. All right, my goal was to get her to say yes to the question, will you marry me, right? And so the question soon became, how do I do that? How do I convince her into saying yes, right? And I wish that I could tell the story like this. I wish I could say that we rode our motorcycles out to this beautiful, cute little restaurant down in Smithville where we ate a delicious and amazing dinner. After that, I led her on a windy, twisty park road that led out to this scenic overlook at sunset, rose petals scattered all across the floor. I then dropped to one knee where I beautifully and eloquently explained to her just how amazing she was and how blessed I would be if she would be my wife, and she would, of course, then have to say yes. That ain't what happened. I wish I could say that's what happened, but in reality, we did ride our motorcycles out to a restaurant in Smithville. That was one of the ways that we kind of first connected when we first started talking, was we both enjoyed riding motorcycles. And I had planned to go to a certain restaurant, and we got there, and it was closed. Oops. Okay, so we found some other little hole-in-the-wall, whatever, restaurant. I don't even remember what I ordered. Doesn't matter, right? Then I had planned to go down this park road, really pretty road, really pretty ride, particularly on a motorcycle. The park was closed, so I had to find a different road. Luckily, I knew a way to get in from, not from the park. I missed a turn. But we got there eventually. There were rose petals scattered on the ground. I did manage to make that one happen. But because we took a wrong turn, we got there a little late. So it wasn't sunset. It was a little darker. And I dropped down to one knee. And y'all hear me. I do words for a living. I'm a professional words guy. Words are what I do. You're pretty. That was about all that managed to come out. But despite all that, she said yes, guys. Now, I had a plan. It was a pretty good plan, I like to think. But despite the fact that that plan went sideways at almost every single step of that plan, she still said yes. And it may not seem like it, but I did have a plan to achieve my goal. The goal was important. It mattered. It was worth putting something together in preparation. And I think that we set goals all the time. If you've been following us in this series and you were here last week, hopefully you wrote down and have been praying over your God-sized goal over the course of the week. But maybe some of you are sitting here and you're saying, okay, I did the homework, Greg. I got my God-sized goal. I prayed over it, right? The Lord gave me clarity in what that goal should be. What do I do with this information, right? Where do I go from here? Now what? We make a goal and then we feel stuck. Anybody ever been there before? Yeah. We make a goal and then we feel stuck. And if you've ever been there, that's okay. Trust me, all right? We have all been there, whether we'd admit it or not. What matters is how do we get unstuck? And so that's what we're going to talk about today as we dive into Nehemiah chapter 2. There's this French author that I'm going to absolutely butcher his name because I'm not French, nor do I speak French, but his name, I believe, was Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I ain't French, don't judge me. But he was a pilot. He was an author, a veteran of World War II, and he has this really impactful quote that I found when I was kind of preparing this message. It says this: "A goal without a plan is just a wish." A goal without a plan is just a wish. And when you come to understand the importance of a plan, the importance of strategy, the importance of gathering supplies and resources for your goal, then you move from having a wish to having a goal. And that's what we're going to figure out today. How do we formulate a plan of attack to accomplish the God-sized goal that the Lord has laid on our heart? Because we are all capable of accomplishing big things. God has given us the ability to reason, the ability to problem solve, and make things happen. But in order to do that, we need a plan. And Nehemiah had a plan. If you go to Nehemiah chapter 2, for those of y'all that weren't with us, last week we went through Nehemiah chapter 1. We looked at this guy named Nehemiah who was a Jew, and he finds that the remnant of Jews are attempting to return from captivity in Persia to Jerusalem, but he hears that the rebuilding efforts are not going so well, that the walls are destroyed, that the gates have been burned by fire, and throughout all of chapter 1, he cries out to God in prayer, and it's laid on his heart that he's going to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. The problem that was presented through the lack of walls and the lack of the gates was really twofold. The city was destroyed, and because there was no walls and because there was no gates, there was a really practical problem, which is that God's people were open to attack, right? The city was defenseless. But there was also a spiritual element to this goal, in that the city that the Lord had given his people lay in ruins, and in so dishonored God. And so by leaving God's city in ruins, it dishonored God. So his goal was to rebuild the walls and be obedient and return him and his people to obedience in the Lord. If you recall last week, we said that God-sized goals are bigger than just me, right? They should serve God and his people. And so, inspired by his love for God and his people, he sets up this goal. I'm going to rebuild the walls. And we left off at the tail end of verse 11. Let's recap verse 11 of chapter 1. Nehemiah is saying this: "O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now I was cupbearer to the king." Now, upon first glance, we kind of left this verse out last week, or we read it, but we didn't really dive into it. But upon first glance, that "now I was cupbearer to the king" feels really random, right? He cries out to God this big prayer, and then it's like, oh, by the way, this is my job. This is where I worked. And it feels really random, but was it? Before we get into chapter 2, there's three things that I get from just this one verse. Three things that I think that we can take away that Nehemiah did that we should do as we pursue our God-sized goal. The first one is this: take the first step. Take the first step. Nehemiah did not pray for step-by-step instructions to fulfill his goal. He said what? And give success to your servant today. Somebody say today. Give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. He asks for guidance and success today, but not every single step of accomplishing his goal. I think that oftentimes we as Christians, we're so scared to make a move. We're so scared to make the wrong move that we don't make any move. And we just say, God, I'm going to stand right here until you reveal to me every single step of the plan so that I know how we're getting from point A to point Z. And I'm going to wait until you tell me all of it. If I can be real, and this may sting a little bit, but choosing to do nothing is still making a choice. Furthermore, I think that if God were to reveal to us the entirety of his plan for my life, maybe I'll just speak for myself so I don't insult anybody, I'm not sure I would follow through with that plan. If the Lord spoke to you and said, hey, you're going to go through some real pain Things are going to get really dark and really hurt, and it's going to be really awful for a long time. But in the end of it, I will use that pain to reach people for my glory. Would you go through with that plan? I think if we were honest, there'd be a lot of debate at least. Hey, you're going to struggle through years of infertility. I know how badly you and your spouse want to start your family. I know how badly you desire to have children, but you're going to go through years of infertility, and that pain is going to just be debilitating at times. But I'm preparing you to minister to those in your life that are going through that exact same problem. Speaking just for myself, if the Lord, when I said that I started, here leading worship 10 years ago. If the Lord 10 years ago at the age of 18 told me, hey, Greg, I want you to preach the word to these people, I'd go, what? God, what are you talking about? I barely even want to get on stage and play guitar. You want me to preach the word? What if I mess it up? And maybe, just maybe, we need to be a little bit more like Nehemiah, and instead of asking for every single step, we just ask for the first and we be obedient in taking that first step. I had this candle. It was an example that I almost didn't do because I was like, nah, it's going to take too much time. Y'all okay if we get out late? Somebody said no. Fair enough. We'll cut the gospel presentation at the end, I get. No, I'm kidding. I almost didn't do it, but the Lord has really been putting a theme together, at least for me, recently. Bishop mentioned this verse several weeks ago, and then we covered it in our young adult group last Thursday, and then half the lights didn't work today, and that just felt almost like from the Lord saying, hey, we're going to turn the lights off, I did a little bit of reading into lamps and what lamps were like in biblical times. And the kind of technology of lamps didn't really exist. Oftentimes it was just a jar that would burn like fat or oil. And Psalms 19, 105, many of y'all I'm sure know it. It says, God's word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Can you shut all these lights off in here, Gavin? Every single one, like off. I can't see a single one of you. This lamp is not that powerful. It's not that bright. I cannot see the front row, much less the back row. But you know what I can see? One step in front of me. You know where I can see now? One step in front of me. And then one step in front of me. And then one step in front of me. The lamp is not that bright. It does not reveal the entirety of God's plan, but what it does reveal is the next step. And if I'll just be obedient in taking that next step, it'll be obedient in revealing the next one, and then revealing the next one, and revealing the next one. God's word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. You don't have to know the entirety of the plan. You just need to be obedient in taking that first step. Turn them lights back on. I'm getting scared. I also didn't have fat to burn, so this is a citrus champagne scented candle. I'm going to put that out because otherwise I will burn the stage down. And that's all we need to do to add to this Sunday. So take the first step. You don't need to know the whole plan. Give success to your servant today. And so take the first step and start now. Not tomorrow. Not next week, now. By the end of his prayer, Nehemiah is already working on his plan. God, give me success in what I'm about to do. Right? He already knows the step that he's going to take, and he's starting when? Today. So often we think that God can't yet use me to accomplish my goal. My goal is I want to tell my coworkers about Jesus, but I can't do that just yet. I need to study up some more on my Greek in case someone asks for the language of origin of a particular passage of Scripture. Well, I don't have fully formed thoughts on eschatology and how that relates to our current election cycle, so I can't tell my coworkers about Jesus. Who cares? Who cares? You're not fully prepared. Now hear me. I'm not saying that it's not important to plan, okay? That's the whole point of this message. But if you plan and you plan and you plan and you plan and you never put that plan into action, you are wasting your time. My wife, I love her to death. She's a beautiful and amazing woman. She is a perfectionist. She will just fixate on a single aspect of a project until it is done to absolute 100% perfection. And I've had to teach her something that we have in the Hoffman household, and it's this saying: done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. Listen, you can't do it perfect anyway. But God can use your imperfection to perfectly execute his will. But it only happens if you go. Start now. And finally, and then I swear we're going to get to chapter 2, take note of your resources. Take note of your resources, right? Give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now, I was cupbearer to the king. This feels like the most random oddball statement. Why is he reminding us of his job? He knows what job he works. No, he's taking note of the resources that he has available to him so that he can pursue accomplishing his God-sized goal. As cupbearer to the king, he would have access to and influence to the most powerful person in Persia. The Lord had given him resources, and he was preparing to use them. We covered it in last week's message, and you can see it obviously throughout the entirety of chapter 1 that Nehemiah's immediate response to discovering the God-sized goal was prayer. Immediately he went to prayer. But during this prayer, we can see that he's already getting to work. Nehemiah planned while he prayed. He planned while he prayed. And so we see the first steps of his plan. Okay, talk to the king. God has given me access to this man. I'm going to talk to this guy. And so he puts that plan into action. Nehemiah chapter 2. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, seeing that you're not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart." And then I was very much afraid, and I said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad, when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" And then the king said to me, "What are you requesting?" Listen to this. So I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you would send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it." And the king said to me, with the queen sitting beside him, "How long will you be gone, and when will you return?" And so it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber and beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy." And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. Nehemiah puts his plan into action. Okay, God gave me access to this man. I'm going to go speak with the king. And so God had given him that resource, and he does it. And so the king says, "Hey, why do you look sad?" He had an answer prepared. The king says, "Okay, what do you want?" And I love that in verse 4. You're going to see this theme all the way throughout the book of Nehemiah. So I prayed to the God of heaven. Nehemiah reaches back out to God in prayer. He's not doing this on his own throughout this process. Okay, God, how do you want me to handle this? And he had a request. The king says, "How long are you going to be gone?" He had a timeline prepared. And notice that in where is it? Verse 6. "How long will you be gone, and when will you return?" We talk about God-sized goal being bigger than us, and this is proof of it. He's not going home to Jerusalem. He's got to come back to Persia at some point, and yet he still has this God-sized goal that he's going to sacrifice of himself so that he can go and rebuild for these people before he returns. But that's a side note. Nehemiah had prepared what he needed. He had a materials list. He had a timeline, right? He even had Google Maps pulled up. Okay, well, I know I'm going to have to go through this certain area, so I need to get a text tag, right? Throughout this whole process, Nehemiah continuously talks with God in prayer, but he didn't wait for God to do all the work. He didn't wait for God to do all the work. He used the mind that the Lord had given him to plan and to prepare while he was waiting for the right opportunity. And so when the Lord presented that opportunity to him, he was ready. God arranged for that perfect moment, and he was fully prepared to take advantage of it. He didn't just wait for the lumber to fall into the cart and for it to automatically start walking itself to Jerusalem. He had a goal. I'm going to rebuild the walls. He had a plan. I'm going to talk to the king, and he had preparation. When I talk to the king, I'm going to need these materials, this letter, these permissions. He prepared while he planned. He prepared while he planned. See, preparing is different from planning, okay? You can plan to go skydiving. It's simple. You get in a plane, you jump out of said plane. But if you don't prepare a parachute, you ain't gonna do nothing but splat. Y'all see what I'm saying? So Nehemiah prepared while he planned, and he planned while he prayed. And so he's underway. He's got the first few steps of his plan, right? The next step is being illuminated as he's going. But as we very, very quickly find out, there are going to be some people that are not interested in the good of God's people. Continue with me in verse 9. Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. And so I went to Jerusalem, and I was there for 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me. Remember that phrase. And I told no one of what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. And I went out by night, by the valley gate to the dung spring and to the dragon spring and to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. And then I went up in the night by the valley, and I inspected the wall. And I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. And I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. And then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been put upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. And so they strengthened their hands for the good work. But listen to this, verse 19. When Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite servant, and Geshem the Arab heard it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, what is this that you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? But then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. So Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem, and again, he's immediately taking stock of, okay, let me inspect the walls. Let me see, okay, well, this section looks all right. Perhaps we can save the foundation, right? Well, but this is completely in ruin. He's starting to take stock of what it is that he has and what it is that he's going to need and the work that is ahead of him. And he starts to inspect various sections of the wall. And remember that phrase in verse 12, he didn't take anyone with him except a few men. But in verse 10, I find it incredibly interesting that between verse 10 and verse 20, you see that there are people that do not want God's people to succeed, right? In verse 10, you have two. You have Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite. And it says that he was in Jerusalem for 3 days. And by the end of chapter 2, he's already added more people to his list of enemies. Look at verse, 19, Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, and now there's a third guy, Geshem the Arab. The list of enemies is very quickly growing. Hear me, church. When you make God-sized goals, there are going to be people that will oppose you. There are going to be people that do not want to see you grow closer to the Lord. And more than just people, the enemy does not want you to succeed. Do you think that the devil wants you to grow into the husband or the wife or the father or the mother that the Lord has called you to be? There will be opposition. You think all your coworkers are going to be cool with you defending the name of our God when you're sitting around the water cooler? There will be opposition. You think the devil wants your kids getting here on time so that they can go to kids' church so they can learn about God? There will be opposition. Sometimes it's going to come in the form of a temper tantrum from a 4-year-old who doesn't want to put his shoes on 10 minutes before you got to be at church. But there will be opposition. And don't be surprised if sometimes opposition comes from those closest to us. And so, like Nehemiah, we got to learn not to be naive. We should expect opposition. And this is why we have to be wise about who we trust, right? Verse 12, he says, "Then I rose in the night, I and just a few men with me." Just a few men. This was before he told any of the Jews of the work he was going to do. This is before he didn't take any of the officers of the army and the horsemen that had to ride with him. Just a few men he took with him. And so the question is, who are you trusting to help you pursue and accomplish your God-sized goal? And is that the right person? Oftentimes, the wrong person, I think we kind of immediately think of the naysayers and the oppositionists and the kind of Debbie Downers, you know what I mean? That's kind of where my brain immediately goes to when I think of the opposition that doesn't necessarily want me to accomplish my God-sized goal. But sometimes it can even come in the form of a yes man, someone who's not going to love you enough to be like, bro, what are you doing? If everyone in your life is only affirming what you're doing, are they the right people? I'm not saying you got to go find, well, this guy hates me, so I'm going to, Geshem the Arab, he's the right person. That's not what I'm saying, okay? But what I am saying is that oftentimes the right person is the person who loves you enough to tell you when you're wrong. Nehemiah planned for opposition. As we wrap up, because I don't want to get out late, as we wrap up, I got 3 steps that we should take. 3 steps that if you are feeling stuck in your God-sized goal, in the pursuit of your God-sized goal, 3 things that we can learn from Nehemiah chapter 2 that we can employ as we go about our week. Those 3 things are this. I want us to pray, I want us to plan, and I want us to prepare. Like a good pastor, they all start with the same letter, so you can remember them. Pray, plan, prepare. Right? We need to be a praying people. And just like Nehemiah, we need to ask God to bless us today as we set out to achieve our God-sized goals. Hopefully over the past week, you've been praying over that God-sized goal that was your homework last week, right? And hopefully you've been doing that. If you haven't, maybe that's your homework for this week. Lord, is this goal your will for my life? Right? That's how Jesus taught us to pray, right? Lord, your will be done. Your kingdom come. And if your goal isn't lining up with God's, he's probably not going to bless it. Right? We see it all throughout. Where is it? I gotta scroll back through here, right? Verse 4. So I prayed to the God of the heaven. He reaches out to God. Hey, God, is this how you want me to pursue it? Verse 18. Right, I told them of the hand of my God that had been put upon me for good. Right, verse 20, the God of heaven will make us prosper. Back up a little bit to verse 8. Right, and the king granted me what I had asked. Why? For the good hand of my God was upon me. If you're not pursuing what God has for you, he ain't going to bless it. And hopefully you've already done that. But if you've already done that, then maybe your prayer this week should be, Lord, would you bless me today? Give me success today as I set out to accomplish my goal. Lord, would you give me just one step that I may be obedient to walk in it? We need to be a praying church. We also need to be a planning church. What is your plan to achieve this goal? You don't have to have every single step of this plan figured out, but I challenge you to figure out what is that first step and how can you be obedient in that first step. And listen, do not be lulled into this false sense of security that setting off to achieve the calling that God has placed on your life is going to be easy or without struggle. There will be opposition. And I would encourage us, church, to plan on it. Why? So that when it comes, you're not surprised and you're not discouraged by it. Look at verse 20. After Nehemiah has just been rattled at, by those that would oppose him. Verse 20. How does he reply? He says, "The God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem." The enemy has no right on your calling that God has placed on your life. The enemy has no portion of your kids if you set out to get them to grow in the Lord. The enemy has no right to what it is that God has put on your life. And you need to remember that now so that whenever the enemy does come calling, you are prepared. And finally, the band's going to come back up. We need to be a people that prays, we need to be a people that plans, and we need to be a people that prepare. Put legs to your goal. What does it actually look like in a practical, real, tangible way to pursue the God-sized goal that the Lord has placed on my heart? If your goal is to strengthen your marriage, I might say that the first step would be to pray together, that you would pursue God together. Right? And when it comes to putting a plan together, okay, we're going to attend church together. We're going to do a marriage study. And then, each one of us is going to individually have our own separate God time. That way we are personally growing in our relationship with the Lord. That's the plan. Great plan, right? We're going to go to church. We're going to do a marriage study. We're going to grow in our faith individually. But how do we prepare for that? Well, if you're planning on going to church every Sunday, perhaps you should clear your schedule. That thing that you normally have to do on Sunday, instead do it on Saturday. Or instead push it to Monday or do it after church, right? We got multiple services. You can figure out a way, right? If you are planning on doing a marriage study, you need to figure out some practical aspects of this. When are you going to do this study? What study are you going to do? Is it going to be self-taught? Is it going to be a video series? Is it going to be one of our groups that we have here at Calvary? Maybe you need to take stock of your resources. If I can just encourage you, if you go to our website, cbcfamily.net, and you hover over the ministries tab, there's a tab that'll pop down that says library. And if you click that library tab, you will find a huge backlog of 4G guides, which is a resource that has daily devotionals. It has group time questions and discussions, as well as family time questions and discussions that you can do with your children, right? You have resources available to you. On top of that, you'll also get access, if you go to that library tab, to this resource that we've been using at the church for quite some time called Right Now Media. And Right Now Media is it's like Christian Netflix. It has just tons and tons and tons of video series that you can go through on your own, that you can go through with your spouse, that you go through with your children. There are resources available to you. Put a plan in place, put legs under it with preparation, and pursue the God-sized goal that you have been placed on your heart. Right? If your goal is to teach your children to grow in the ways of the Lord, you need to pray for them. Jeff said something. We were in the office as I was asking him about, this. Jeff said something that just whopped me right in the face. He said, so often people pray and pray and pray to have kids, but when their kids are born, they stop praying for them. Oh. Lord, I don't have kids yet, but don't let that be me. And so we need to be praying for our kids. Maybe you need to plan to invest in your kids' faith outside of Sunday morning. And so to prepare for that, what does that look like? If your kids go to our kids' church back there, this is something that Jeff just recently rolled out. You will get an email every single Monday if your kid checks in that has like a recap of what they're learning back there, so that now around the dinner table you can talk to them about what they're learning in church. And starting in October, he told me this just the other day, they're actually going to send out an email that will have video resources of follow-up material so that you can, throughout your week, pour into your children's faith. So we need to pray. We need to plan, and we need to prepare. So my question for us as we get ready to respond is simple. What is the first step that you can take in obedience to achieving your God-sized goal? In just a minute, we're going to sing. And my hope is that you'd pray, God, can you reveal to me that first step? Just that first step, and God, would you give me the strength to be obedient in following it?